Hello again for a new episode. Again, this is Chase the Traveler. I bring you information that you rarely get on YouTube or on TV. I give you realistic examples of what could happen, not what always happens. So, without further ado, today's episode is about in-laws. It's about Japanese in-laws. I'm going to give you 3 different examples. Now, in-laws, I don't care which country you go to. I think every society has problems with them. And, even in America, you're going to have people from the same country who don't get along with their in-laws. Over here, there's a layer of difficulty due to the fact that you might not understand the culture, you might not understand what can happen or what will happen. But anyway, let's get on to my first example. There was a guy that I knew. This was about 25, 30 years ago. He had been with his then girlfriend in America. They came over here, and after 2 or 3 years, they ended up getting married. Now, when he got married, things weren't exactly as, as good as they were back in the States. But since he had been with her for about 2 or 3 years, he decided, okay, something, I've been with this girl, so I might as well just marry her and get things going. Now, he didn't exactly get a lot of resistance from both of her parents, but her father was like, oh, well, she's getting a little older, so I think, maybe, let's just get it over with, and let's just do what we got to do. Her mother was like, who is this guy? Does he have any money? Is he rich? She was more against it. She was actually behind the scenes showing her pictures of Japanese guys that she could get married to in order to break him up. But for him, his marriage, she was already determined that she was going to marry this guy. So therefore, what her mother was saying didn't really stop them. But the thing about that is, right, these in-laws, you got to battle them behind the scenes. Remember, they're not messing with you while you're there. They're messing with you when she goes home, when she gets into an argument with you, a fight with you, and then they go, oh, see, I told you they were like this, but they didn't know. Oh, didn't I tell you that you would have this problem? Yeah, but you would probably have the same problems of Japanese people also. And obviously, if you and Japanese people or somebody of the same race got along better, then you would have been with them. You wouldn't have been with the foreigner. So these in-laws are pretty much potent. They're lethal when you and your significant other who's Japanese are not getting along, because that's when they could really say, hey, see, I told you, you should have listened to me. That's when what they're saying is really lethal. Now, with his situation, he told me that sometimes he would get into an argument or a fight with his wife. One particular argument where he didn't want his wife working at a certain place. Now, in Western standards, let's say if you're talking about America, now we're not at the age or era where you can tell your wife what to do, where to work, etc., etc. That's not politically correct. But in Japan, it is okay to do that. It's socially acceptable here. So he was becoming a little Japanese, He was doing what the Japanese were doing. He was like, something, I don't like you working over here. All of a sudden, what do you think she does? She gets on the phone to her father. And all of a sudden, but of course, he doesn't know that this is happening. This is happening behind the scenes. And she gets on the phone to her father, and all of a sudden, her father comes and picks her up. And, he's like, what's going on? Oh, well, hold on a second. She says that she wants to leave or whatever, blah, blah, blah. He was like, what are you talking about? Hold on a second. What's going on? And all of a sudden, She ends up, the father comes pick her up. She goes back to her house. And of course, after her father hearing what happened, he brings her back 2 days later. So you got to deal with things like that, where you married someone who you thought you were an adult, who was an adult, but sorry about that, the train went by, wasn't exactly an adult. And pretty much he had to deal with that multiple, well, no, he didn't have to deal with that multiple times, but pretty much it's like he felt like he was married to somebody, but he wasn't really only talking to her or having discussions with her. He was having discussions with her, but she was basically having discussions behind his back with her parents, and they would tell her what to say to him. But of course, he didn't know that at the time. So it was truly difficult for him. Now, like I said, whatever country you go to, you might have the same situation, but I'm just explaining a situation that happened here. And of course, Japanese people have that same problem. I mean, Japanese people, especially women, in the past, the Japanese ladies used to move into their husband's house, and they would have to take care of their husband's families. And a lot of young girls these days don't want to do that. They don't want to live next to their husband's families for that particular reason. So this is not just a foreign thing, but I would say that Japanese people are better prepared because they know what to expect more so than a foreigner. So a foreigner having to deal with that situation might get caught off guard. So now, with his situation, they eventually got a divorce. She took his kid after the kid was a year old, disappeared. And you could imagine what that was like, how traumatic that was for a guy. You have a kid, you love the kid, you don't have a problem with the kid. You come home one day and both kid, mother, everything's gone. And when he saw the kid again at 12, the kid thought that she was Japanese. She thought that her grandfather was actually her father, and she didn't even know that her father was black. So you could imagine the confusion, but everybody around her probably knew that. So imagine how stupid she was walking around thinking that she was Japanese in a school when everybody knew that she wasn't. So that's how they handled that. And finally, at 12 years old, when she finally figured out, that her father was who her father was, the damage had already been done, and she was already culturally to the point where, there was no return because he wasn't going to be seeing her every day or every week. He wouldn't have the normal fights that daddy-daughters have and then make up again. So all that, so she had a huge advantage in those 12 years. So he only saw her about 10 more times after that, and the relationship never became normal. So now, example number 2. This was a guy, he had the support of his wife's father, his wife's mother. He went over there. They weren't a really well-to-do family. And, he was, he felt blessed that they didn't really hold any animosity towards him. They didn't really reject him. They were okay with him marrying their daughter. So everything was great at the beginning. And not only that, he felt so comfortable that he even moved into their house on the second floor. Now, this is what I'm talking about when you don't understand Japanese culture. But most Japanese people would not do that because they understand the complexities, the cultural issues that will arise, and the responsibilities that arise when you move into somebody else's house, even if you're marrying them. You might love the person that you're with, but getting along with the parents and them is a totally different story. So now he moved into the house. Everything was fine. Everything was perfect. They would cook for him, but this is where they started to have problems. He was an English teacher, and as an English teacher, a lot of your job has to do with talking. So you have to talk 6, 7, 8 hours, especially if you're working at an eikaiwa, which is basically an English conversation school. So if you're working at an English conversation school in eikaiwa, your whole day is spent talking. So when you get home, you don't want to talk anymore. But you're living in their house. They eat downstairs. So when you come home, they expect you to be down there with them, eating, laughing, and smiling, ha ha ha. Now, if you just finished working at an eikaiwa, you don't really want to do that because you're tired of talking. Because half when you're working at an eikaiwa, your job is, of course, teaching, but your job is also about entertaining. So you kind of have to make people laugh. You have to make people smile. You have to have a constant grin on your face. And, when you get home, you really don't want to talk. You're kind of like, okay, I've been entertaining all day long, plus I've been teaching, I'm tired, I don't want to talk, I just want to eat and just relax. But then he didn't understand that, as soon as you go home, these people, again, you are a foreigner, you're living in their house. Of course he was paying rent, but then you still have to entertain them to a certain degree because they want to talk to you, they want to do these things, and when you go straight up to your room, you don't talk, they find that offensive, they find that difficult. But of course, he didn't know that, he didn't understand that. So he started getting into trouble. And when he had kids, he had one child, and all of a sudden, he was noticing that, when you have a kid and you're like a new dad, you want to set a good example for your kid. You don't want to give your kid any bad habits. But he noticed that his stepfather, they had a dog. He was taking food out of his mouth to feed the dog, and he thought that wasn't really something that he liked, and he didn't like the stepfather doing that in front of his kid. Another thing is that his stepfather would, again, these people were not rich. He would go outside with his kid Sorry, I had to wait for the train to go by. He would go outside with his kid and introduce his kid to homeless people because his friends were like, like these day laborers and stuff, because these people were not totally rich. So he was like, hold on a second, I don't want you introducing my kid to people like this. So he ran into trouble that way too, because he didn't particularly think that was a good thing. So eventually he was like, man, I got to get out of here. So he took his wife and kid and moved to a different location. So now the in-laws were like really upset because they did like their granddaughter. And they didn't appreciate him moving with their granddaughter and their daughter to a different location where they didn't have access and they couldn't do these things. So things went down south real quick. So as soon as they moved to a different location, all of a sudden, again, you have a situation where people are talking about you behind your back and you don't know it, and you're not prepared. So basically, they were talking about him behind his back. He didn't know it. He wasn't prepared. And little by little, they turned their daughter against him. She had an affair And they ended up getting a divorce. Even though their relationship really wasn't all that bad. So your in-laws could affect your relationship, especially if you don't know what they're telling your wife. And a lot of people don't know that, don't understand that, don't believe that they can be affected by that when you could definitely be affected by it. So, long story short, he was in love with this woman, and he thought he was doing the right thing by protecting his kids. And his in-laws were upset that he sent his kid away. And they turned his wife against him. And again, when things are good, they can't really turn your wife or your boyfriend against you. They're strong when things go south and they don't give you the support, or they make things that are normal sound like it's abnormal, and the person that you're with is receptive to that because of their emotional state at that time. So, like I said again, I'm not saying that these issues are only in Japan or these issues are unique to Japan. No. But I'm just telling you that these things can happen over here. And you sometimes have to watch out for that. So, you got to be careful. Now, number 3, this is the third example that I have. This is another friend of mine. He got married. Actually, he's still married. Been married for over 20 years, 25 years. But he's got problems with his in-laws too. Now, when he got married to his wife, her father wasn't around. He had died of cancer. And so he didn't really, affect their relationship. And the mother, while he was dating her, was like, hey, you know something? She's getting older now, so you can't just be messing around with her. You going to marry her or what? So he felt pressure. And he said, okay, well, you know something? All right, well, maybe I shouldn't, just be fooling around like this. She is 30. And in Japan at that time, if you were over 25, most likely you would not be getting married. They used to call you Christmas cake. Excuse me. They used to call you a Christmas cake because if you are over 25 years old, no Japanese man would want you. And it's like over here in December, they sell a lot of Christmas cakes. And after the 25th, nobody wants to buy those cakes anymore. So Japanese women were considered Christmas cakes. So if you're like 27, 30, you're really pushing it. So he decided, okay, well, you know something? All right, fine. I'll marry her. They got married. And for the first 3 years, everything was good. There really wasn't any problem. It was like a pretty normal relationship. But then little by little, again, you had pressures from the in-laws, or one person, the mother, where, she had a brother. The relationship was very, 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 very formal. What I mean by that is they only got together when there was like an official engagement. For example, after a certain number of years, you have a priest would come to the house to perform some kind of ceremony because the father had died. So they invite you over for that. The brother got remarried. To a new wife. And of course, they invite you over for that because nobody else would come because that was his second marriage. So When they need you, they invite you, but when they don't need you, you're never around. But his kid with his wife never met his brother's previous 2 children. So it was like him and his wife had, his wife's brother had children that his wife and his son never met. And he always felt it was because he was a foreigner. So things like that happen, where they have a relationship with you, but it's a very, very formal relationship. And they invite you over for like formal things, but you're never going to come over for like, say hello, haha, hee hee, and things like that. It just doesn't happen. So of course, things, again, for me, I mean, having spent so much time in Japan, and I haven't had a situation where friends of mine in America are doing things or getting married, and I know what they're going through. So I know more about what's going on here than what's going on over there. So, I mean, hey, you can send me a comment and say, hey, you know something, same thing happened to me in America, same thing happened to me in India, Africa, or, South America, whatever. Okay, that's fine. I'm not saying it can't happen anywhere else, but I'm saying that it does happen here. So, that's the thing, when you have in-laws over here, this video would help you, because you have to understand that when your wife or your husband goes back to the in-laws, they could be talking about you. They could be discussing something that you did with your wife or an argument that you had. And if they don't like you, they could spin it in a way that makes it look like she is correct, even though she was wrong. I'm not saying that the foreigners are always correct. Sometimes foreigners are wrong too. I'm talking about if you make logical decisions, if you're talking about logical things, then of course, that might be upsetting. So, again, also, I don't want to give you guys the impression that everything always goes south and the in-laws are always against you. But these things do happen here. And these are 3 examples that I've shared with you, 3 real examples. Of course, I can't share people's name because they haven't given me permission. But for all those people that live here, you know that what I'm saying is very realistic. So, when you marry your cute, lovely little Japanese lady, you definitely want to know a little bit more about the culture than you know. You definitely want to know a little bit about how people react and the people that she's interacting with. Because that has a lot to do with how your marriage will be, whether your marriage will be successful. And again, thank you very much for viewing. I really appreciate it. As always, please like, subscribe, and I always try to reply to comments whenever I can. And I always encourage people to watch all my videos on Japan if that's why you're watching, because that will put everything into context. You watch one video and you're positive or negative one way or the other, that is not my whole image or how I feel about everything that goes on here. Every 25-minute segment is about a particular situation, not every situation. But I am confident that my assertions are true and real. And I tell it to you like nobody else does. Thanks again. See you again in the next episode, Chase the Traveler.